We all know the struggles of the early game, trying to build up your economy when suddenly you get cheesed. Your opponent isn't patient enough for an honorable macro game and runs at you headfirst with a massive army as soon as possible. But at least you just need to hold those. The cheeser's economy lies in shambles, and once you clean up the attack, it's GG. But what if your opponent could launch a mighty charge towards your gates while still macroing behind? Now that is the scary nightmare called 3-Rax. With its immense power and early timing, it can feel like you're being all in, but in reality, your opponent is already swimming in minerals and gas, while you are fighting to stay alive. Today we will have a closer look at this feared build order and how Protoss players at every level can defend it. For that we will analyze players of 4 different skill levels from gold to pro level, starting where every single game of StarCraft begins. The build order. Of course you don't know what your nasty Terran opponent will throw at you, so you can't just blind counter 3-Rax every game. But with a solid and tight build order, you will have a good foundation for your answer once you scout the attack. Our first player is Master Aju, a fearless gold level Protoss from Europe. Unafraid of the YouTube comments as well as his Grandmaster opponent, me, he will show us his very best. After an odd and pretty inefficient 13 pylon, we see an old school style of playing with a designated builder probe, which consequently idles a lot in between commands. At least he has easy access to it with a hotkey. Or he would, but he decides to send it across the map. The choice of its successor must have been particularly difficult, as the Nexus goes down significantly delayed, and the same goes for the Cybercore. At the same time, we have a big oversaturation at the assimilator. Overall, this opener is very loose and unoptimized. There definitely is some training to be done. Let's hop over to our second contestant, Azarel, the North American tryhard stuck in Diamond 1. Maybe we can give him some tips to finally get that Master's rank. And boy does he not disappoint. Starting with a high tier Reaper wall, he will have one less issue on his mind in the early game, his buildings are perfectly on time and his chrono boost usage is immaculate. You can really see that he's a guy that sits down, watches a fresh build order tutorial on YouTube and just trains it until he sees it in his dreams. That brings us to the biggest fork in our players' build orders, the tech choice. There are multiple viable options depending on your preferences and playstyle, but obviously the response to early aggression differs depending on your tech choice. Azarel goes with a Stargate, planning for some fast phoenixes to scout and harass. As we are already in America, let's visit an old friend of the channel, Mechanic, Grandmaster Protoss, terrible changeling and ex-world record holder of rank roulette. Of course his early game is tight, as expected at his rank. Personally I like to see a Reaper wall here, but I can forgive him for that sin. Mechanic plays Nexus before core into Twilight Council, giving him options like early blink pressure or maybe even a charge wall attack. But our cheeky American has something different in mind, as he will go for a DT drop, probably one of the best build orders against the 3-Rax, but more on that later. Now you might think, Harstem, if your third competitor is already Grandmaster, how are you planning on topping that with the fourth player? Easy, I just asked MaxPax, the Danish prodigy and ESL Masters Europe runner-up. And of course, as we know and also expect of him, no mistakes or delays in his build order. He also opens with a Twilight Council, but contrary to Mechanic, he is not planning on any invisible boys. Now, circling back to the start with Master Aju, his choice of tech too is the Twilight Council. Although once again quite delayed, as he ran into a major supply block after forgetting about the second pylon. All players have now picked their tech path, but what should they do with it? That brings us to the second, but maybe the most important part. Scouting. I might sound like a broken record at this point, repeating it in every single episode of 4 levels of, but knowledge is power. We cannot defend what we don't see coming. And here we find something that all of our contestants from gold to max packs have in common. The probe scout after the first gateway. This is an essential concept in PvT. The early probe needs to find out if the first barracks is built at home, or if we are looking at some proxy Reaper, or even proxy 4-Rax Marine shenanigans. Probe scouting might look easy, but trust me, it can be quite hard. As even MaxPax makes a tiny mistake with his probe scout. We should always try to find out what the first unit that pops out of the barracks is, but he doesn't. If you don't confirm Terran's first unit, You cannot really move out with your first adept without taking a major risk of leaving your mineral line undefended versus a potential Reaper, and thus you are forced to stay at home. Well, unless you're Maximus Peximus, he's a brave Protoss warrior running his adept blindly across the map anyways while chronoing the second. Mechanic also does not scout the first Terran unit, yet again, a mistake. Subsequently, he stays at home with his first adept, which will have consequences in the near future. Funnily enough, our gold player, Master Aju, actually scouts the first Marine, although he does it rather inelegantly. His scout investigates the Terran main like a detective at a crime scene, and to be fair, playing Terran is kind of like committing a crime against humanity. As Master Aju is thirsty for knowledge, he does not leave a single inch on the Terran main unscouted, which might not be the worst idea if you are unfamiliar with general Terran timings. But as a result, his probe overstays his welcome and runs straight into the line of fire of some wannabe Jim Raynor. At least he did scout the first unit, I guess, so is that the best scout of the day? No, it is Azrael who does it best today. He runs across the map at an appropriate time, scouts what's necessary, and then starts to be a pain in the butt with the probe, blocking the CC from going down as long as possible, and then even harassing the SCV building it as he waits for the barracks to produce. He's just a little bit too greedy. As the Marine rushes down the ramp to save the SCV, Azrael confirms the Marine as the first unit, but is unable to save his own worker. A more elegant way would be to patrol the probe at the top of the ramp until 1 minute and 47 seconds in-game. If there is no Marine popping out by then, you can be pretty sure that it's a Reaper and get your probe to safety. Now, Marine first does not immediately mean that your opponent plays 3 Rax. It might as well be triple CC, or a fast Hellion, or a fast Mind Drop, which all require a different response. The early probe scout only saves us from proxy shenanigans and scouts the first unit, in this case the Marine. And this means that our adept can go across the map without any fear of losing his fellow probe friends to a nasty cliff jumping Reaper. The shade ability is like a free surveillance camera in the Terran's natural, giving us knowledge of army as well as worker count, without having to run up the ramp and losing a unit. Here is where we see our opponent's true intentions. You see, 3 Rax is a 1-gas build, meaning the Terran needs 3 less workers in the main, as he only has 1 refinery. Now, these workers actually go into the natural, and thus you can count them. Side note. If you are at a level where the Terran opponents do not consistently build SCVs, this is not a great tell. Now, I believe at that level, it probably is also fairly unlikely that Terran manages to raise their depot consistently. So trying to get info straight from the source, the main base of the Terran, with the shade might just be worth it. Back to our contenders. While the gold adept forgets about the shade ability, runs up the ramp himself and simply dies, which is obviously not the correct play, Mechanic's adept idles at home since, as mentioned earlier, he did not get the information of Terran's first unit, and against 3 Rax, time is a rare and valuable commodity. When Mechanic finally realizes that there is no point in waiting for the non-existing Reaper, he runs across the map and immediately sends his first shade up the ramp. That is PvT Scouting 101, as you really need to know if there's a factory on the first reactor. In that case, you'd need to prepare for some early Hellions or mines. Now, Mechanic does scout the barracks on the reactor, but as his late adept is getting chased away by my Marines, he only has barely more information than Master Aju. A blunder that honestly is quite common, even at the higher levels. But not at the highest ones. MaxPax delivers a masterclass in adept micro. Yes, he did take a major risk sending it across the map straight without confirming the Marine first, but he also sends his first shade up the ramp, sees the barracks on the reactor and starts chipping away at my units. He fully abuses the advantages of the regenerating shields, while every single shot I take will permanently weaken my push, as there won't be any medeffects with it. Constantly keeping an eye on the ramp, he wreaks havoc in my natural, sniping Marines over and over again, and does not give me a single second to breathe, poking in and out again and again and again. Although he also does not scout my worker count. I spoke to him about that afterwards and he admitted that this was an oversight and he definitely should have done that. So, in the end, 3 of our contestants have no clue what's coming towards them, as Azrael does not anticipate my scout denying Marines and barely loses his adept without even being able to shade towards the reactor, while MaxPax is the only one with any real clue as to what is kicking off. So, what's next? The defense. Now that we get to the nitty-gritty, it's important to differentiate between the tech choices. They don't really matter during the scouting, but when it comes to the response and not dying, they are fairly different. Well, unless you decide not to use it. You might remember Master Aju going for a Twilight Council opener, which is a solid choice. But his one just idles, not starting any upgrade. Instead, he throws down a random Forge and Templar Archives. Now, that might be nice tech if your opponent is unaware of your spawn position and busy asking for directions on Reddit, but the moment your opponent isn't AFK and applies any kind of early pressure, you'll just crumble. And that's exactly what happens here. Yes, our Gold Warrior does start a Twilight Council upgrade in charge after all, but when my Marines and Marauders stim into his natural, he has a measly 4 Stalkers without blink and a very poorly placed shield battery that can be sniped immediately. Even though it takes him a while to realize that the game is already over, which funnily enough makes it the longest match of the day, there's nothing he can do but tap out. Yes, tech is nice, but only if you use it swiftly and on time. Let the pack show him what's up. Same opener, although a lot tighter and without random tech that no one can use yet anyways, but a completely different response. MaxPax's annoying adepts that already cost my push multiple Marines before it even started, see the move out with the Marauders and shade into my natural one last time, forcing me to briefly turn around so that they can't decimate my mineral line for free. I move out and walk into a huge Stalker army that is already on the map to meet me. This is a very important concept. Stalkers have superior range and speed to Marines and Marauders if not stimmed. So with a little bit of micro, you can just kite, sniping one unit after another until the force that arrives at your wall is nothing but a shadow of its former glory. Or you force the Terran to stim once or even twice out on the map already, greatly reducing its unit's HP. In this case, MaxPax even realizes that he does not have to respect my push and just fights me in the middle of the map. His flawless micro is a big reason why he beats me here though, so I'd rather suggest you play it safe. Kite the army home and beat it with the help of a super battery. But this kit is just built different. GG. So, with a Twilight Council opener, you want a shield battery in the natural, have some kind of gateway wall to funnel the Terran units and meet them on the map already. Easy enough. But if you open Stargate like Azrael did, it becomes a lot harder to defend. The moment you scout the 3 racks, you need to adjust your production, throw down a robotics facility as soon as possible and only get up to 2 Phoenixes as well as 2 shield batteries. But as we already know, Azrael is blissfully unaware of the push since he lost his adept. He should have sent his first Phoenix immediately to figure out what's kicking off. Rather than that though, he is greedy and patrols 2 of them on the map, trying to catch a medevac, which obviously won't come anytime soon. Azrael overbuilds Phoenixes and delays his robo due to some gas mining issues in the main base. These 2 factors make it that the robo starts way too late and thus is only barely finished as my push arrives. You can chrono boost all you want, there's just no time left to get any immortal out, and let me tell you, 4 Phoenixes and 1 adept will not hold this push. Azrael, not a man to waste any time, taps out quickly, admitting his defeat. But I know he will watch this video keenly and improve his skills to never lose to a 3 racks again. Now we're only left with Mechanic, who kind of broke the system by luckily blind countering my build order. DT drop is simply insanely good against 3 racks. You drop 2 DTs across the map, 1 into the main and 1 into the natural, while warping in a 3rd DT at home. A good Terran will obviously always save a scan for DTs, which means that of course this Terran had no scan saved for DTs. But a single scan won't save you anyway, so no harm done there. You'd need 3 full scans to clean up all DTs, and that is just impossible to have without severely limiting your economy and delaying your push. You either clear the DTs at home, most likely only getting 1 of them anyways, meaning your push will die to a single invisible side-swinging boy, or you kill the DT at your army, but in that case you will lose all of your SCVs for free, and if the Protoss was smart enough to build a sentry, he just force fields the wall, buys time by healing it with a super battery, and will sooner or later with the next Dark Templar. But don't worry guys, I let the Ken man know what I thought of this strategy before stepping out. As you can see, once you really understand the 3 racks, it's actually not that difficult to hold. You just need to know it's coming, meaning the most important things you should work on are a tight build order and detailed scouting. To reiterate, make sure your probe scouts any kind of proxy rack shenanigans, as well as the first Terran unit. If it's a Reaper, keep your first adept at home and send the second one across the map. If it's a Marine, there's nothing to fear and nothing to wait for. The adept should always scout the ramp to see if it's a factory or barracks on the reactor. Then scout the SCV count in the natural. If it is higher than usual, prepare yourself and try to annoy the ever-living crap out of the Terran by constantly poking in and out, using your free regenerating shields to damage or even snipe as many Marines as possible. In case of a Stargate opener, throw down your Robo after the first Phoenix, go up to 2 Phoenixes total, get 2 batteries in your natural, and add in Zealots and 1 or 2 sentries as well for an added defense. Be sure to continue teching into Colossus while this is happening though, otherwise you will have no tech available once you actually stop the push. If you opened up with a Twilight Council, pump out those Stalkers as well as a Warp Prism and move out to meet the Terran army in the middle of the map to kite it home. In all cases, you should always build a shield battery as well as a semi-wall in the natural. A sentry and healing the wall with a super battery ability can buy you a lot of time to get some extra units out. Just remember to save some energy in the natural nexus for that, and if you open up DT drop like Mechanic, well, I guess at this point you know what I think of you.